Thank you. So we were having a discussion outside, and we're really sorry we got absorbed with our coffee. We apologize for keeping all of you wait to listen to this wonderful panel. As the introduction has happened, the faces are there. I would still want us to call out our names. My name is Samhita.
I'm Abhijit.
Aruna.
Jayanthi.
Abhijit.
Perfect. On that note, we have been tasked heavily to drive the narrative of what we call is the global landscape for ESG, especially with respect to ESG strategies coming to reality. We all understand that ESG is not just impacting the performance of businesses and organizations, but it is really impacting all the three pillars of environment, social, and governance. And with that note, what we really are going to discuss on how each of these pillars are getting addressed with respect to how each of the organizations that we represent is tackling it in nearer time. Among ourselves, I am very sure that we have more than 100 years of cumulative experience, not just representing our own organizations, but also representing the organizations that we come from, we have served or built in this process. With this, I open up to our first conversation, which is a question that is addressed to the entire panel here. The question is very simple. We all understand ESG is gradually transforming from just a compliance into being a strategic imperative. And when we consider strategic imperative, what is the question that we're trying to solve for today is how do we see ESG being integrated into our daily landscape in the way we operate as organizations. And to be able to answer this, the two elements that we will tackle today is our understanding of ESG in itself and our alignment with the core principles. I'll request Jayanthi to kick it off and then we'll follow the circulatory.
Thank you, Samhita. Yes, we are in a transition phase with respect to compliance towards from a voluntary basis to compliance and moving towards the leadership space in ESG. Just to give probably a quick note here, I had an interaction with one of the EV electric vehicle founders, a startup company, and the discussion was he asked me, why do you think people are still going for electric two-wheelers in India? Is it they want to be, towards nature friendly, reduce emissions? No, the petrol price is so much, and that's the only reason people even choose EV vehicle. So that's a very practical oriented answer, I would say, and that's the reason. Similar to the industry, when you look at it, yes, we have moved away from, I would say, voluntary towards the compliance because the overall country's commitments towards NDCs are driving those, which towards compliance is very, very mandatory, and it will transition towards a day-to-day. Yes, we are there on ESG, over the few years down the time.
Thank you for the invitation to speak here and share some of my thoughts. I'm looking forward to learning from all our panelists. I'm told in 1981, the founders apparently put their heads together at Infosys, and the question that was posed to them by Mr. Murthy was, what should the vision of Infosys be? And of course, they went around the table. And everybody said we should become the best software company, we should be known globally, we should break up so much revenue, etc., etc. And then it finally came to Mr. Murthy's turn. And he thought for a while and he said, to me, the vision of the corporation should be that we must continue to earn the respect of our stakeholders. So I think from the inception of the company, the language of stakeholders was very embedded in the way Infosys looked at business and looked at larger good. And I will reserve some of my examples for the next few questions. But just to tell you, in 2008, 2009, Mr. Chris Gopalakrishnan, the co-founder of Infosys, was a member of the United Nations Global Compact. And in his role in the compact, he made a commitment that Infosys would become carbon neutral in 2020. Everybody applauded, he came back and we didn't know where to start. But what an engineering company does where they simply measure everything. Yeah, so we started this whole madness of measurement. And people asked us, a lot of people asked us, why should a software and services company care about carbon and being carbon neutral? Are you nuts? Isn't that for the manufacturing sector? And Chris at that time told us, he says, buildings, which are essential for our kind of industry, consume more than 39% of energy. And in it, I think anywhere between 35 to 40% of global emissions. So the built environment is a massive contributor. And he said, that's where we will start. So I think integrating sustainability into the way you think is much bigger than looking at a specific action. It's kind of the ethos that powers solution.
Hi everyone. The question is very macro, I would say, because when you say a company, like Atria is a conglomerate, it has got so much of diverse companies along with it. It comes into education, hospitality, comes in power, renewable energy. I would say ESG was something that was inherited and not put across. It was a vision that started the company and the subsidiary companies along with it. When you say Atria Renewables, the natural resource utilization for a better social cause was the first vision that they had. Atria Education, sustainable project for the students who can have a better life on project-based learning for the societal causes. Subsequently, when it moved to Project Chittu, it was for the rural development and urbanization was not part of it at all. I don't know how it came out, but things got a little changed and then people again started streamlining their goals into the ESG. I would say the Project Chittu was one part where it streamlined and came back to ESG, but it initially got into urbanization. So that was more of a mind.
Thanks, Samhita. So I think, being from, I think odd one out here from the real estate industry, commercial real estate, Bagmane Group. So and some of you, from Bangalore would know that, we build tech parks, right? Essentially, that's the business model. Now, real estate as an industry are slow movers, right? Late to the party when it comes to, sustainability, kind of maturity curve, right? And the journey for this industry, including us, started perhaps at the maximum around 5 years ago, and some of us have started maybe just 2 years ago. And when I say start, that means very different things. I think alluding to something that was mentioned before was it started with compliance. It didn't start with the intent, and that's what happens with most of the industries, right? So it started with because either if you're a listed company, BRSL required to report, or in our case, commercial real estate clients wanted to report. So some of our biggest clients are Google, Nvidia, Boeing, some of these massive companies, right? You know their networks. So we as part of the supply chain are mandated to report and disclose on environment, social and governance metrics. So these are the two essential drivers, when it comes to real estate, including our own business. But within that, there are a few nuances. Of course, built environment, again was mentioned a couple of times, that takes precedence, right? For us, energy efficiency, waste, water, your embodied emissions is super important. For all of us to reach our net zero journeys, and governance also has picked up, and that's why we're reporting better. But social is a far cry from being anywhere close to mature, and that's the place where I suppose real estate in particular, and other industries too, but we have a lot of catching up to do.
Thank you. I'm going to summarize these few keywords for all our audience. But let's move on to the next one, Major Prasanna. The conversation of ESG has been long-lived. However, the conversation of traditional charity and driving systemic change, what we call driving purpose with profit, how do you see these as values treated in your organization, and from obviously the extensive experience that you come from, some of the best practices would be super helpful for us to drive relativity.
Well, traditional charity and systematic change, right?
Yeah.
I think these two terms are not different. I see them both together because, for an example, if you have created subsidies for farmers and if he's not able to implement it and he's not able to utilize it, it's just a charity. But the moment you set up a procedure how to implement it and make him work out and generate revenue, that's the systematic change that you're expecting. So that's one part where I say that both the entities are not different, they are together. And in order to, there was a second question I could remember.
No worries. The second question is, sorry, the leaders are struggling to hold long-term vision versus the traditional short-term pressures that we go through. How do you integrate these two as part of your ESG mandate?
So station notice that there are short-term changes and there's long-term vision. How do you circumvent the pressures? I believe it's the team that you work with. There's nothing if there's no proper team or no proper structure to it. If team is there and it is supporting you and they all look at the larger vision, I don't think there are any pressures to stop by. For an example, let's consider a mother. Mother has a kid and she works hard to get this kid going and she knows what the future lies. If he has got less marks, if he has got some quality between the kids and he's not working well, but she has not walked into that pressure. She knows that this kid is going to work out and I need to put my efforts into it. And that's how we grow to a better kid. That's what we see at every project does. We need to believe in that project. We need to believe in the larger goal. Like for Project Chittoor, our vision is to get smiles for the 44 crore families who are working for the marginal farmers trying to get the average revenue. We need to work it out. We need to see what kind of streams can be generated to give them adequate revenue. It can be agriculture, it can be agrivoltaic system which can generate some additional revenue. It can be agro-tourism or it can be education pillar as well. But we need to work it out. And come what may any barriers, people are there to hold your hand and tell, see, we need to make this happen. We need to make these farmers get some good sustainable revenue and have a better future. These small pressures will not let us walk up. So there's one example I'd like to
I love that KPI-driven mission because you've set a vision. The entire short-term pressure as well as the long-term goals are all directed towards the vision. Very similar to what we do in natural disasters. You can't do or solve for natural disasters without having that mission of 1 billion decisions, 1 billion houses, 1 billion people. I love that thought. Hanging in there for our next conversation with Aruna, the entire conduit of scale and visibility has been a challenge or has been an area where the organization seem to be operating in. How have you been solving it, especially using diversified experiences, because you also anchored that chapter and the cohort of DEI, but more important, diversified experiences. How do you think that comes into play for scale and visibility of mainstreaming ESG into your business?
Okay, that's a loaded question. I'll give you 3 examples to give you a sense of this. Many years ago, I think it was in early 2000, I was doing this huge crusade for a 6-month paid maternity leave for women in India, across sectors. I don't mind admitting now, at that time I tried when I came back after every meeting, I got thrown out of boardrooms. And they would tell me something like, shut the door gently behind you when you leave. You know, instead, I mean, where did somebody as crazy as this come in to add cost? Yeah? And I struggled very, very hard to help them move out of that cost mindset. I tried everything from the World Health Organization stats, which said 6 months is the minimum breastfeeding period. It's good for the mother, it's good for the health of the baby. I did everything. They looked at me, they tapped at it sympathetically and threw me out. And that's when I realized that there are some things that require a much larger platform. Around that time, the World Bank actually published a very telling piece of research which suggested that if India improved the participation of women in the labour force by 10 percentage points, the GDP would become some phenomenal number. I forget the number. And as soon as that research came out, I cannot tell you the number of phone calls I got. And people said, hey, tell us about that 6-month paid maternity leave. I said, I threw in childcare. I said, organizations must also be responsible for childcare. Might as well make hay while the sun shines. It just passed before the House of Parliament. Because India, there's also a timing around some of these things. The critical mass was there, and India and the demography of India. I mean, it would be stupid for a country with aspirations as big as ours to shut out almost 50% of the talent that we have, simply because we didn't think they required the accommodation. So I think it made business sense, and it's the timing, it's the critical mass, and I'm telling you, it's a World Bank report. And after they came back, and I was reporting at that time to the CEO, Mr. Praveen Rao, he says, you've got to be careful with this woman. When you tell her something can't be done, she goes out there and does something else. I said, I level the playing field for all of you. I don't want anyone to think they're doing a big favor. Yeah? And everyone will get axed or benefit uniformly. So I think scale comes from thinking about what seems impossible. Because very happily we've confined ourselves into these little boxes, and it's a comfortable place. Who wants to shake it? I mean, who cares about shaking? Yeah? I mean, that's one example. Another example is my favorite project in 2006. We had a massive situation in Electronic City where I work, and many people were quitting their jobs. They didn't want to come to work. We had a joke where you could play 2 whole hands of cards just sitting in that traffic across cars. Yeah, because you were sitting for so long, every day. You could even have some money exchanges, we had kitties, etc., etc. It became such a bad joke that people started quitting, saying, I don't want to be wasting my time. 3 hours for a 10-kilometer stretch, and give me a break. Yeah? And we had this fantastic road that was a 2-lane road with deep nalas. I don't know what the architect thought when he designed that road. Every day you will have a huge truck sitting in one of the nalas. That's holiday because you can't move. The road is blocked. Now, I remember at that time, Mr. Murthy said we have to do something. Can we create a solution that actually enables us to get to work more comfortably while also addressing everybody else who's using that road? And that's when the project of the high road came up. It just so happened, Karnataka has this unique fortune of having always the opposition in the center and the state, so that the two may never meet and think alike. Yeah? But at that time, we got the project started off. And one of the biggest challenges that I had was to get, it's a national highway project on state land. So you can imagine. Yeah? But I think when you think of solutions that create a larger good, you're actually thinking far ahead of the curve. I worked on that project like my life depended on it. Mohandas Pai, who was then my boss, said, we will name this road after you when you're dead. my children were growing up, they were very young then, and they just get this excitement, says Mama's road, this is Thai road. Yeah? So I think it's about thinking and solutioning beyond the obvious. I mean, we will have continued to develop the road, make up the road, etc., etc. That 15-month project that I did, it was the first elevated road on a national highway in India. Yeah? And I refused to get it inaugurated till the Union Transport Minister, at that time Mr. Kamalnath, came to Bangalore. He came on a helicopter, landed on that, with the drama, whatever.
But
I think it's important to look at it beyond. Now when we look at what Infosys has done, today we have, we call ourselves pioneers of energy efficient building. We've got a lot of heavyweights in the building sector on the panel itself. And the thing Mr. Murthy said is, first do it before you talk about it. Today with close to 30 million square feet of the highest green rated building floor space that we have actually created a forum called Assure, which is accelerating sustainable real estate. And considering 70%, that's what Google says, of buildings in India are yet to be built. The buildings in 2030 are yet to be built. I think it's a fantastic way to create a transformation. Yeah? So the Ashore Forum is massive. In my role at Electronic City Industrial Township Authority, we are looking at, we have 169 members. It's not, Infosys doing anything is a drop in the ocean. I don't think it matters. But if we can get 169 companies doing it in concert, that's the endeavor that we are on. And so scale is about show, tell, learn, and transform together. You know, there could be some ideas out there that we've not considered. How do you do that? And how position?
A powerful contribution to Abhijit, who is also ex-Wipro and is now leading Bagmane as a senior leader for sustainability. Integrating social innovation into campuses, into the workplace, into your daily strategies. How do you feel about it in specific to real estate? And I will add a flavor to it of how do you add to it in your environment matrix? And I'm clubbing both of them so that you can give us a segue conversation or a roadmap of how do you think an ideal looks like. If you had superpower, how do you think the ideal look like? And what are some of the best practices that you have seen where social innovation has been integrated at the grassroots level to drive meaningful real estate?
Okay. So, right at the outset, let me kind of just declare that as of now, social innovation as a concept really doesn't exist in real estate, right? I mean, it's not that, it's a fact. However, there's been a lot of movement towards integrating wellness, well-being, dignity of labor, things like that within, say, let's talk about commercial real estate as an example. And now that's a combination of multiple stakeholders coming together. So in our case, it would be us. One is that we, of course, our own employees, whether it's permanent employees, whether it's contractual employees, and you do have an extended, where they're not employees, but contractual employees who are working in the informal labor space, right? Say in the camps, there's daily wage workers who are contracted to other vendors, right? So there's that. And then you have the largest kind of stakeholder group, which is the employees of our tenants who essentially occupy most of that square footage. Now, there are multiple things that we're looking at. One is, for example, if you had to look at a framework, right, for environment, you have LEED certification, you have multiple assessments. But for social, right now there's WELL, right, which is part of the International Well Building Institute. Now, WELL certification essentially it is superficial to a certain extent, but it does look at a few things. It looks at, for example, wellness and well-being, looking at parameters of thermal comfort, of inclusivity. There's well for equity, for example, on campuses. It looks at air quality, which is really important, right? So air quality in your campuses, both indoor and as well as outside. It looks at biophilia. So how can campuses become more inclusive spaces just for people to kind of, whether it's for meditation, whether it's for people to just take a break, mental health. So all of this is now just becoming default kind of discussions when clients approach us to, for example, have a build-to-suit building, right? So a Google or whoever it is, right? I mean, build-to-suit, they want this for their employees. These are non-negotiables. So I'll give you an example. So, one of the things in our sale deals, our sale agreements, is apart from renewable energy supply and all the usual stuff, right? They are absolutely hell-bent on having well-certified buildings, right? I mean, air quality is number one priority. Now, this is talking about our employees and our clients' employees. So this is kind of a little easier to take care of, right? Because you have your reporting and disclosures. However, there's this large group that is left out of this reporting, and that is your informal labor, right? Who work in the labor camps, and that's a much more tricky situation. Now, at our end, we do our best in terms of due diligence with the vendors that we work. You do spot checks. You have the usual compliance hygiene checks, right? However, there is still a problem, right? In terms of in terms of dignity of labor, in terms of how people are treated, despite of the spot checks. So this is clearly a black spot in the real estate industry that all of us as industry leaders need to tackle. And currently, I'm sorry to say, there's really there's no strategic way currently to look at this, right? So that's one thing. I just want to put this out there because that is an area that we need to work on. In terms of innovation, I think through philanthropy, real estate has a massive opportunity. Philanthropy is kind of undercooked. CSR is still in the usual, you build some schools, you have checklist philanthropy, right? But I think there's a real opportunity here to work on engaging with that workforce, right? In terms of skilling. And I think living conditions is one, but even in terms of skilling. For example, there are so many masons who work on our sites. And I think for them, there's nothing more to look forward to ahead of that. And I think we've had this discussion with a couple of other roundtables. How can we, through philanthropy, engage with other partners to kind of upskill them, so that there's no social mobility. So I think there's a large pool of these workers who can move beyond what they're doing for us at the sites, right? So I think that there's one clear opportunity here. Other than that, if you look at within the organization, on an average, real estate companies, we look at diversity as a metric, right? Diversity is fairly low. Forget about other categories, I'm just talking about women in workforce. Women in workforce ranges from anywhere from 8 to 14 or 15, which is quite low. It's a function of the industry. But it's also a function of a mindset that women can't do project or facilities management roles, right? And there are many companies like Ola Electric, and I can name multiple others who are proving that wrong. So women can work on factory floors way better than men can at double the efficiency, right? So I think that mindset change is needed. We are consciously, at least as an organization, we're constantly working towards that, and that requires some serious introspection driven by data, by HR, right? And that's where all these reporting frameworks are helping us. It's giving us those actionable insights, and then we're clearly understanding that diversity in real estate was never in place, right? Never. It doesn't feature in any discussion. But now it's coming, right? And now people have seen. I've seen in our design team now they're, we've hired, these 5 super qualified ladies. And the management can see the output difference. I'm not saying this just because, just to make a point, but it's clear, right? And it's just that you've given someone an opportunity to take that chance, and hire, and we've seen the results. So I think we're at a tipping point in the industry, and clearly this is an area that we need to work on. But I think now working with other leaders to create these skilling opportunities with philanthropy on one hand, and again introspect more on your own employee base and with your other stakeholders. I think that's what you need to do.
I love the social innovation conversation. These are brilliant and very sharp cues, which I will summarize at the end of the session as well. Thank you so much, Abhijit. Jayanthi, coming to you. All of us are in application in your segment. So, if you can teach us on, and I'm going to go a little narrower into decarbonization as a conversation. When we think of decarbonization, and we think of decarbonization meaningfully, two are almost two words of different spectrums. How do you believe, or how have you learned, or you've seen this across the world as coming together? And if you could also clue us into this understanding of resource constraints that we see in building ESG as a credibility. And ESG here would mean not just environment as we have all spoke about, but the social element of it that we touch base on, the governance element of it that both Aruna and Prasanna have been highlighting, driving it from the vision to having a mission goal to be able to tackle the short-term and long-term pressures. If you integrate all of them, and I want you to answer, how do you feel about the term resource constraint when you also think about decarbonization as a conversation, as you have seen it with multiple clients of yours, plus the work that you have done in your past?
Sure. So yes, with respect to ESG, as that I spoke in detail, The S and G has been driven by the regulatory frameworks in every country. The G is the baseline for any corporates to exist as such, right? There is nothing additional, and it's been there for so many long years, right? And similar to social as well. Social, probably the new terminologies across DI and things are new, but pretty new, I would say. But whereas with respect to labor laws or employee well-being, this has been there for long, long years, which is not something you're doing additionally right now. You're more on innovation spirit in these areas, which will benefit your own organization, your employees and things. Whereas environment, we've been looking at sustainability, probably a new terminology, and environment, because we are seeing such physical hazards on our day-to-day life. We are the generation which is going through it, where we have started seeing, okay, we know now the terminology, 1.5 degrees, there is a COP happening for 30 years. This is the 30th year they're going to be meeting. So there's a lot of commitment around it and discussion about it happening, but right now it is the hot topic with respect to discussion, thinking that we need to concentrate on environment. But there has been environmental regulations right from 1980s, 60s, I would say, from in India with respect to Environmental Act, Water Act, and there are many things that has come through. So when you say about my experience, I would say I will take 2 decades back when I started as a very energy efficiency consulting, supporting green building certifications, looking at designs of architectures, MEP consulting. Those were the days on the other side of the table. We will have to sit through, tell them, no, this is cannot be done on a thumb rule basis. They say, okay, you have a 10 feet by 10 feet bedroom, you put a 1 ton, 1.5 ton AC, which is very basic. But when you say construct a hotel of 300 room hotel, you apply the same logic. You can run it by even just 1 to 2 TR, 2 ton of air conditioning for every room. You can run it at 600, hardly 600 tons, but it is designed for 1,400 tons. When you look at such a large facilities, by a thumb rule basis when they go about. So when I used to be on the other side of the table telling them, no, you need to do a scientific design simulation for 8760 hours. You can't just do a heating day design, 1 peak day design, and design the entire building for the thinking that 365 days, 100% occupancy in a hotel. It doesn't happen. Hardly 10 days you have occupancy, 100% occupancy in a hotel industry, just to give you an example. So then that side takers are, yes, okay, scientific simulation. You're actually simulating, like your flight simulation, you're simulating an actual condition, considering the climate for so many hours, what is the impact it has on air conditioning design, which is the direct impact on your emissions to climate change with respect to GHG emissions, your refrigerants used in air conditioning, the capital, the capex that goes into it, right? So that's a huge savings that actually brings in. So there were times around it where we get challenged from the other side. I'm saying 20 years back. But whereas what does these certifications does is the green building certifications or ISO, any certification for that matter, they give you a checklist kind of a format. Where do these companies start? Where do you start looking at sustainability, whether it's green building for my industry? How do I start this journey? So these frameworks gives you that. If you see 20 years back, rainwater harvesting to STP design, these are not mandated. It's not just a tick box as a governance, okay, I do have an MOEF clearance that I need to go through or an EA clearance. I do have that design. So there were times I used to sit on the other side telling them that rainwater harvesting has to be designed for so and so capacity. It's not just you don't even look at the soil quality, whether the water can actually penetrate inside even after designing, and how much rainwater harvesting you really need. So these were the times when again there is a market, I would say, innovation on these solutions availability as well. There has always been a give and forth, and those days again I will go back, solar and wind. How much we used to talk about renewable energy, giving them an ROI, how important it is to go towards it. The technology was just evolving around solar. But now there is no ask, 20 years down the line now, you don't even talk about it. These are there already. But how do you improve from there? How do you make it more efficient is the discussion now, right? So similarly about climate change and environment, I'm coming back to that topic very specific to climate change in the ESG environment with respect to say physical risk or transition risk. This is now taken, again, we are in the transition phase. Yes, as I said, governance or company secretaries in these large corporates to listed companies, they do look at, okay, what is the mandate coming from my government? I will do that first checkbox, because everybody is running around on thin margins in their P&Ls, right? It's not like how much more I can do about ESG into them. That's where they are, and there are companies like Infosys and large conglomerates who want to be those leaders in that space. The top line has that vision to drive how important is it for them. Right? I remember Narayana Murthy tells in many things, I just take bath in one bucket of water. You know, how much importance of water he used to give in any of the discussion. And right now we talk about water security. We see flood risk, how much important it is to look at building design or in a city level planning, how important is it with respect to rainwater management in itself. So that's the journey that we are seeing. Next 5-10 years, this will be like, yes, we've already done it. There is enough technology and resources available for the corporates as well, where the pricing now, presently it is of course the finance that keeps them, not everybody to directly go and adopt it, but somewhere down the line they will do it. And another that driver I would say is the business continuity itself on a risk level. This is something from a governance perspective which the top line keeps seeing it, but if they understand what is the various risks, whether it is a reputational risk or is it an operational risk, looking at their supply chain, how much it can affect because of climate change, the reputation especially, with respect to anything on social media, how easily a brand can come down in a very quickly. And if they don't address these things, and they themselves are not an example being, in that kind of a space, whatever industry they are, it becomes very important in that aspect. And resource, I wouldn't say there is a constraint at all in resource. I would say it is more from a finance and profits perspective which is looked upon, and everybody tries to balance that in whatever manner it is applicable to them. That's the journey that they all take. It cannot change in a just say 1 year or so. Everybody needs to understand it's a journey, and they will look at it from a business perspective.
The last question, and it's an open for all, is how do you view the role of technology, particularly AI and ML, and of course data, which feeds into these engines, to be able to drive all the conversations that we have had so far? And we can start with, this time we can start with Abhijit.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So I quickly I'll address that. So I think right now there's a preponderance of across industry, the preponderance of ESG platforms, right? So essentially these platforms are there for you to kind of digitize all the data that you are otherwise manually inputting on energy, water, waste, employee metrics, all of that into this platform that auto-populates emission factors, all kinds of things, right? So you can do your GHG inventories, you can pull out presentations to send to your management, tracking energy performance, business as usual versus your targets and things like that, right? Even employee diversity metrics. So, and in this now, AI is playing a big part. For example, now these platforms also generate your ESG reports, your sustainability reports, your BRSR reports. They tie, they've got API integration with CDP and other such platforms, GRESB. So now what's happening is AI is also auto-generating sustainability reports for you. So instead of hiring a consultant or writer to write it, these platforms are doing it for you. They've got document recognition, so it picks up BESCOM bills. And it can, from the BESCOM bill, it can identify how many units are from green energy and how many are from conventional energy. So that's where AI is moving. I mean, I'm still a little skeptical about it because I think at this point you can't completely trust it. But I see that flip. I mean, it's going to change drastically in the next 1 or 2 years.
Let's say AI in terms of education, agriculture, both. It's changing way around. Like for agriculture, when you say AI is being used for climate science. Now, if I want to understand the humidity, temperature and the soil content, the chemical integration, the NPK, that's all being done by AI right now. I can sit over here, I can check what is the soil content in Chittoor, which is 3.5 hours far away from here. And then I ask someone to do the radial measures over there. Similarly, if you see in education, right now AI has become the horizontal. You have got cloud, you have got cybersecurity, you have got data science, but everything, AI is there. And in Atria University, that's what we were looking at, like digital transformation and climate science, both being different domains, but there is interdisciplinary projects happening, and AI guys are working along with climate science and making the project happen. I think that is the way future right now. There's no set of degrees or set of departments and branches working in silos. It's all integrated and it's all interdisciplinary. If somebody knows a computer science and he wants to work somewhere in only computer science, it's not happen. Right now it has to be, the person has to know what is electricity. A computer science engineer needs to know what solar is. He needs to know what bioscience is. Only then it can function. And that's what's happening with the help of AI.
I'm going to be a bad student and not answer this question. You remember when you were small and you didn't know the answer. Your mother told you, answer all the questions, write whatever you know. They will give you some grace marks. I'm actually worried for the world. We've not been hugely responsible, even without somebody else making decisions for us. And so I think one of the things that I want to connect back with is the human conscience. Of course, there's technology and there's AI, and coming from a technology company, I can give you a discourse on AI. We're prepared for all of that. But I ask myself some very fundamental questions. When we're talking about ESG and you want to make a difference to the world, ESG applies to you as a single human being. Think of yourself as a system. Yeah? What are the governance rules? Yeah? Are you being honest? Do you act with integrity? Do you have respect for everybody? That's nothing beyond governance and doing the right thing.
AI ethics. That's what everybody looks at.
AI ethics. You don't have ethics, no, I don't do AI ethics. I'm just saying. So I think while we must write technology, because technology gives you scale, technology gives you a whole lot of stuff. But I think the ability, what will be sad is if we lose touch with who we are and our ability to have a conscience and use that conscience with respect. So I think the big AI will happen, technology will happen. In fact, one of the things that we did was we said that we are a company that's responsible for the adoption of digital. Then we should be responsible to make sure everybody gets this opportunity. And so we democratized learning. We have a platform called Infosys Springboard, which is available to anybody in the world free of cost. It has 20,000 plus courses and more, play boards, leader boards, play field, a whole lot of virtual stuff, learning together, etc. Available to any learner in the world, age 10 and above. Today we have 13.5 million learners on the platform globally. We had a goal of 10 million, we surpassed it. We thumped our chest, we felt good. While all that is happening, people are getting skilled. People will use technology. I want to go back and ground it to the basics of the human conscience and what is right. So when I think of ESG, I'm not even looking at doing the world a favor. What we've done to the world is a product of the cumulative abuse of every individual choice that we've made, multiplied so many times, that it's just become so big that you're staring at it and saying, okay, I don't think I can do anything else about it. And I just want to add the last piece. We talk about sustainability, we talk about solving for climate, the social piece you said has not been addressed much. I was reading 17% of the world's population has what they call a reported disability. Can you imagine 17% of the world's population reported? And of course there could be millions, trillions not reported. How do you then leverage technology to really build an inclusive world for everyone? So I think while we're doing a lot of this intelligence, I think we must be grounded in the way we approach it, the way we use it, and the way it creates inclusion for everybody. Whatever solution we do, whatever we do, how do you have actually a larger universe in mind as opposed to a single transaction? On a daily basis. Sometimes you put yourself out, make some additional investment, which you don't know is going to actually give you an ROI. When I joined this particular portfolio PE, I made the biggest noise about diversity, being critical, etc., etc. They said, go ahead and take it up. Create an ROI for the value women bring. I said, I will not create ROI. Create an ROI for hiring people with disabilities. I refuse to create an ROI for any form of inclusion. What do you mean by ROI? What are you talking about? So I think, Mr. Murthy is credited with the saying that progress is often equal to the difference between mind and mindset. And I think the whole piece around mindset and looking at something more deeply with a conscience is critical. I almost lost my job incidentally, refusing to do ROI, because I believe that was best practice globally. Would you believe it? Nobody's done a damn thing about it. Nothing has changed in the world. Yeah? But it's very interesting to see how we just kid ourselves every time we take a step forward. We're actually taking 10 steps backwards, because we've not just thought that through.
Okay.
Just I want to add something with
Brilliant.
the mindset and resource. Now, we are all talking about resource constraint, but I think the world has moved out to be a resource abundance right now. It's only the matter of acceptance and drive that they need to adapt and implement. If that is the case, I think right now we can move ahead and accept the future. The only thing is, people are still stuck with the resource constraint thing. Right now, we are all having abundance.
That's a happy place to be, unconstrained, so I can't wait. Yeah?
Okay. Now, I love the thing. I have to summarize, and I'm going to summarize it for all of us. We started off with talking about ESG needs to be a vision. Only then you can future-proof buildings and built environment, because it's no longer optional. I like the statement of ESG is a way of business, and it should be a way of business, otherwise we cannot tackle the conversation. Purpose and profit, they come together, as Abhijit said. Systemic is a key word to bring this together. It has to be like a life cycle. It has to happen to you again and again, like the way you do your morning chores to evening chores. It has to happen as a life cycle. It has to be a systemic effort. Love the conversation of how do you tackle short-term pressures with long-term goals, which Major Prasanna mentioned. Mission is very important to make it happen, because then you can stretch, your elasticity is very high, but you can also narrow it down if your elasticity is low. Love the conversation of scale and visibility by Jayanthi. Only possible, I'm adding the narrative by Aruna as well. Right narrative, relentless effort, right time. I took these three words from her narratives itself. But I love the last line that she said, keep thinking beyond the obvious and be absolutely stubborn. I think in our own sets, we have our checks. I just said it in the outside table, among all of them, I can see dollars. And that's all I see, but I'm an entrepreneur now in my current avatar. I only see dollars, and I like the statement that she made, think beyond obvious, be very stubborn about it, and that's what ESG needs today. Social innovation, again, as Abhijit and Major Prasanna both alluded to. Social innovation is at a primitive stage, but there are or certifications like WELL, which does integrate social for individuals living inside the buildings or dwellers. There is a need to expand it to informal communities, particularly the site operators and masons, while inclusive women in the workforce is another expansion avenue for people who are decision makers in this room. This is a cue for you to embed it in your decisions if you can. The last 2 points, E and S and G, is not new. That's what Jayanthi alluded to from our practice. Resources are abundant, regulations exist. ROI is an obvious transition, don't pursue it. It will be pursued as default. Very simply loved the statement of, when you are designing your E and an S and a G, rely on scientific evidence, because there is no single rule for all. There is nothing called constraint. Last one is on technology. Since I represent a technology company, and I represent technology and natural disasters, both heavyweight champions in their own space. One of the things that I liked is technology is omnipresent, maturity varies. while Major Prasanna says agri-tech, edutech, they are very advanced. We also heard Aruna, Jayanthi and Abhijit saying ESG tech is emerging as a compliance and it's a good place to be because even this was missing. But ESG, and this is my last concluding observation, I would say, I call disaster is personal. Natural disaster can happen to anybody. It does not discriminate whether you're sitting in an office space or your home, or your child is sitting in a school, or your family and your partner is operating out of an office. It just does not discriminate. Same thing I would replicate here. ESG is personal. And integrating conscience across environment, social and governance is very, very critical right now because we have done this towards 1.5 degrees Celsius, 10th January 2025 is our own doing. COP can go on for another 30 years if we don't change ourselves and we don't make it a conscience. Last is technology is definitely a horizontal for an inclusive ESG and should be treated that way. But a round of applause to these stellar individuals who contributed. Thank you, AndPurpose, for having us.
Thank you so much.
Please let us go now.